build for ethical hacking, as you're going to see once we dive into it. So I've gone ahead and just went to Google and typed in Kali Linux download. And if we scroll down, we're going to skip this first section here. Let's scroll down to this Kali Linux custom image downloads from Offensive Security. We're going to click on this link and we're going to scroll down a bit. And you can see that there are Kali Linux VMware images. Now, if you're utilizing VMware, this is exactly what you're going to use here. And if you're using VirtualBox, then you're going to use this down here. Since we are using VMware, I'm going to go ahead and select the 64-bit download here. So we're going to download 64-bit. You can either download it just by clicking, or you can download the torrent as well. So this is going to download a 7-zip file. I'm going to go ahead and just hit download and save. And this is going to take a second. This is 2.2 gigs. So go ahead and pause the video. Once your download is complete, we'll go ahead and start from there. Okay, so the download has finished and I'm going to go ahead and select open. Now, if you do not have a 7-zip installed on your machine, you're going to need to install 7-zip. So you can go out to Google and just say 7-zip download. And if you go to download 7-zip right here, download the appropriate one for you. Here is the executable 64-bit for Windows. So go ahead and download this one, install it, again, point and click, and you'll have 7-zip on your machine. So once you have that, come back here and we're going to need to extract this. So go ahead and get your file extracted. I'm going to do that really quick. And I'm dragging this over just to show you it's going to take some time. I'm just putting it in my downloads folder. So again, we're just dealing with a lot of data. Compressed, I think it's 2.2 gigs, uncompressed around 9 or 10 gigs. So make sure you have the space as well when you do extract this. So once this is done extracting your machine, go ahead and unpause the video and come back, and then we'll actually get Kali Linux up and running. Okay, so now I've got my VMware Workstation Player open. Our files are extracted. I'm going to go ahead and just select Open a Virtual Machine. And I've navigated to the folder that I needed to get to, which is just my Downloads folder with this Kali 2019.3. I'm going to go ahead and open that. And now you should see that the file's open. Before we go ahead and do this, let's go ahead and just select Edit Virtual Machine Settings. And there's a couple things that we need to talk about in here. So the amount of memory that you allocate depends on the amount of memory that you have. So here it tells you the recommended amount and the amount that you have maximum available. So for my system, for example, I have 32 gigabytes of RAM. Now, I would probably give this machine somewhere between 4 and maybe 8 gigabytes. I would say 4 gigabytes. If you do not have a lot of RAM, go ahead and leave it at 2 gigabytes. 2 gigabytes is fine. You might notice a tiny bit of slowness, but it's nothing that's going to keep you behind by any means. So I'm going to bump this one up to 4096, which is 4 gigabytes. And I'm also going to take a look at the network adapter. Now, we haven't gotten into networking yet, but we're going to cover some of these topics. So NAT is a protocol that we can use, or we can use Bridge. Go ahead and leave it for now at NAT. If we need to change it to Bridge later, we will. NAT should be perfectly fine. If you don't know what NAT is, that's okay. We're going to cover that here in a little bit. So we'll select OK, and we're just going to hit power on. And when you get this prompt, all you have to say is, I copied it, and it's going to boot up your Kali Linux machine. Now, this is the first time booting it. Sometimes you can full screen it, sometimes you can't. As of right now, we just tried to full screen. It doesn't work yet. So go ahead and let this boot up. It shouldn't take but just a second. Okay, and now we're going to be brought to this login screen here. And the password is going to be, well, the user is going to be Kali. Password is going to be Kali. And you just log in. Might take a second to log in on the first go. Now, you'll be brought to this screen. Now, what you may or may have not noticed is that this is a perhaps different version of Kali that you're running. Things do change as the videos go on. What you're hearing on this video is actually an update from where we were at. As you saw me installing, I was installing 2019.3. as we are working through the course, I'm actually going ahead and doing updates. So this is now 2020.4, and we are adding updates to the course. So the notes that I have for you before we move into the Linux section is, if you're installing Kali and it looks a little bit different, that's okay. These versions do change over time. Sometimes they do get major updates. When that happens, I update the course. Here we are on the latest and greatest as of right now, so this is kind of what it looks like, but don't be too worried if your image or your background or things look a little bit different. Everything that you're going to learn is 95% the same for the most part. So let's go ahead and move forward. We're going to go and move to the next section where we start talking about Kali Linux, and we start talking about an overview of what Kali Linux is and how to navigate around it, and we'll talk about Linux and Linux commands as well. So I look forward to seeing you in the next section. Okay, so this video pertains to some updates we need to make to VirtualBox for quality of life. So if you're not using VirtualBox, you can go ahead and skip this video. If you are, buckle in. We just need to do a couple of quick updates, and then we should be good for the rest of the course. So go ahead and go out to Google and Google VirtualBox Extension Pack. What it's going to bring up is just the downloads page of VirtualBox. So we're going to want to go here. And on this page, if you look kind of towards the middle, you'll see that there is a VirtualBox extension pack here. We're going to just click all supported platforms, and that will automatically download the file that we need. So once that is downloaded, and pause if you need to, go ahead and open VirtualBox. And you can come in here, and up at the top, we're going to go ahead and click on Preferences. And from here, we are interested in extensions. See extensions right here. Go ahead and click on that. There's a little plus sign. We're going to go ahead and click on that. And then you should have your downloads right here. So we're going to take the downloads and just go ahead and install that. Hit install. Read this. Give away your firstborn. Accept all the terms. And you should be good. Very quick install. Okay. The second thing we need to do is we need to come to the one tab up here above, which is Network. We're going to go ahead and hit the Network button, or this Add button, and we're going to add what is called a NAT network. Okay, and we're going to come in here and we're going to double click. And you can go ahead and keep these defaults. I'm going to actually change them to 192.168.57.0 because that's what's going to be used through the rest of the course. And that is what the CIDR notation of my Kali machine and my Keyoptrix, which you'll see later, etc., all fell into this 57.0. So we're going to go ahead and keep it on this NAT network. Make sure you support DHCP. Go ahead and just hit OK. Hit OK. And then for a machine, and make sure any machine that you use, again, any machine that you use in this course, make sure you set it to NAT network if you're using VirtualBox. So you can come in here, click on a machine like this mail machine I have here. You can just click on that, settings, go to network, and then you can go ahead and just go to NAT network. All right. And that name right here, you see name NAT network. That's all we're going to use. That'll automatically set it up. So when you have a Kali machine running later and you have Keyoptrix or another box running, or even when we build out an Active Directory lab, you need to make sure that you're running that NAT network so that all of the machines are on the same subnet. If you don't, you might run into a situation where the same IP comes up for the same machine and then they're conflicting with each other, or you get on different networks and some weird stuff happens. So make sure, again, that it's imperative that you're setting that NAT network for every single machine that you're setting up. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next video in this section. The first thing I'd like to do before we get started with any commands or anything like that is just take a look around Kali Linux and kind of demonstrate why a pen tester or ethical hacker might use this distribution of Linux. Now, throughout the course, as stated in the last video, you might see a different version of this pop up as I recorded videos on some of the older versions. Everything should still work just as is. You just might see a different look and feel to some of the Kali interface, but all the commands I'm going to show you, everything that we do is going to be the same. So let's take a look and just explore Kali Linux just for a bit. So if we come up here into the corner and we just click on the little Kali logo, you could see that we have nice things broken out for us. So we've got these favorites up here, which we have our terminal, which we're going to be living in essentially. We've got a text editor, we've got a web browser, which is basically Firefox. We've got some other tools down here, docs, etc. The other thing that we can come scroll through is we can see that we have different applications in here. If we look at the different sections, these kind of go in order, which we haven't covered quite yet, but in the order of how a hack might go down. So information gathering is usually the first step. You can come in here, look through this, and here's a bunch of tools related to information gathering. You can even click into these and go deeper if you wanted to, related to specific things. So DNS or SMB or open source intelligence. All of this that's in here, this is just built-in tools. So let's say we're coming in here and we want to do a wireless attack. Well, we go to wireless attacks. We've got a bunch of tools already built in. So Kali Linux is just essentially a ethical hacking distribution of Linux, and it's built on Debian. So if you've ever used something like Ubuntu or anything along those lines of a Debian distribution, this is all going to feel really familiar to you with just a bunch of tools built in on top of it. So fairly straightforward. They do have some nice tools in here. You can come through and utilize these. A lot of this is already built in, and we're going to take a look at that as we go. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is, and throughout the rest of this course, is start looking at the terminal. So if you come up here, you'll see that we have a terminal. Now, mostly everything that we do is going to be done in this terminal here. Now, this is almost like accessing the command line. So if you're using a command line like in Windows, for example, if you've ever used a command line, if not, that's okay. But we do a lot of this from this interface as opposed to maybe utilizing a GUI-based interface where if we clicked a folder, this might look more familiar to you if you're a Windows or Mac user. You come in here, you have this kind of area. Yeah, we can do that, and sometimes we'll utilize this, but a lot of times we're going to be living right here. Okay, so as we move forward, we're going to start talking about this command line, how we can utilize it and use it to our advantage, and then we'll do some tips and tricks and hopefully learn some pretty neat stuff as we go. So in the next video, I'm going to cover the sudo feature, which I think is important. It's something that was brought in. Now, originally we had something called a root permission, and we'll talk about that. That has changed since 2020.1 moving forward. So we're introducing that into this course, and we'll talk options that you have. So let's go ahead and move to the next video where we talk about the sudo feature. All right, so before we look at any commands or learn any command line, we have to talk about sudo. Sudo is very important, and what had happened previously was that in the earlier versions of Kali Linux, we ran as a user called root. Root is the ultimate user. You could think of it as the administrator of the machine. Now we're running as a user called Kali, so we don't have root privileges directly. This is as an improved security feature because we should be running only certain commands when we need to as the root user. So what we're going to see is we're going to see how we can run commands as an elevated privilege, and we're going to do that with sudo, which stands for super user do. They just kind of shortened it, so we just have sudo now, okay? Now with sudo, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, I want to run a command elevated. I want to run this as a higher user. In this instance, we can say, I want to run the command as root. Why is that important? Well, let's take a look at an example. Let's say that I wanted to look at a very sensitive file. Now, one sensitive file in our system is the Etsy shadow file. You can see cat Etsy like this, Etsy shadow. And you don't have to follow along right now. You don't have to really understand what's going on if you've never seen Linux. All I'm doing is saying, hey, I want to print out this file. I want to look at it, okay? And for here, I can't see it. It says permission denied. You don't have the access to see this file. That's a good thing. But if I was the root user or somebody that had elevated privileges, I could see it. So I could say sudo cat Etsy shadow like this. Okay, and it's going to say, what is your password for Kali? I'm going to go ahead and say Kali, K-A-L-I. Hit enter. And now I can see that I have access to this file. And this file is very sensitive. We'll talk about this later on in the course, but sensitive file, okay? So when we're looking at it, I ran that command specifically as the root user. As the root user, I'm able to see, okay, this file now. Why, or what's going on here? Well, we're running that specific command, right? And we're still staying as Kali. We're doing this in a kind of one-off scenario. So there will be times where something that you run in this course might require sudo, or you can run the command without sudo, but you notice something doesn't work. So best practice for this is saying, hey, let's go ahead and just run mostly everything that I'm showing you command-wise in this course. That's not best practice overall. Usually you should run things just as a regular user. If you get permissions blocked, then run it as sudo as necessary. Now, the other thing to point out, and we'll talk about this again later on in the course, but why can we do this is because this user is part of what's called a sudoers file, meaning we can have this permission. Not any user can come in here. Say we made a new user and we just called the user John. We can't just take John and just go ahead and just run these commands as root. No, John has to have the permission to do this. So you can think of Kali as being an administrator, but only when we utilize that access or that privilege. Okay, the other thing I want to show you though is that we can switch over to root if we want to. We can come in here and we can say sudo switch user dash, just like that. And then I'll put us into root. Now you can see, okay, we're running root at Kali. And that's only for this instance. You can, if you want, I'm not going to demonstrate how to do this, but you can, if you want, change the root password, log out, and log back in as root, and run through this course as root. Again, that's not best security practice, but that feature is available to you if you are a Linux user that is comfortable with Linux, comfortable with running as root, and you want the easy path. Otherwise, I highly recommend just staying as Kali, running as sudo privileges as you need it, and then moving forward. But this is a quick way to switch into root if you need to. Sometimes even running sudo causes some issues, so switching to root to run a command is okay. What we can do here too is a demonstration is we can go file new tab and look at a new instance, and you'll see that this instance of root is only good for this tab here. Once we start a new tab, we're going to be brought back right back to Kali. You can see that from the top line in the tab as well. So just keep note of this when you're running commands in this course. If you see something, again, try running it with sudo if it's not working, or if it says access denied, then you know, hey, I need to run sudo. Very, very, very important. Okay, I'm trying to drive that into your brains right now. So from here, we're going to move on. We're going to start looking at how to navigate around the file system, taking a look at everything from a bigger picture and diving into terminal. So I will see you over in the next video. Okay, so now our first lesson in Linux terminology is going to be navigating the file system. So if you're a Windows user, you're used to navigating your file system probably through folders, through a GUI, so a graphical user interface. Well, in Linux, we can do that, but the majority of the time we're going to live in this terminal here. So we really need to know how to get around. So the first thing we can do here is we can say, hey, where are we at? And that's PWD. So that stands for present working directory. So you type that in, you hit enter, and it says, okay, we're in the root folder. So we know that we're in the root folder, but how do we get out of the root folder? We can use a command called cd, and that stands for change directory. So if we want to change directory backwards, we just type in 2 dots here. And now we can say, okay, where are we at? So we're in a slash. So we're just in a home folder here, or just our generic slash folder, right? So what we can do is, well, how do we know, can we go backwards from here? Let's keep trying. So we do pwd again. No, we can't. This is our base folder, right? So you have to think of this as the lowest you can go. So now how do we move around? How do we know how to go forwards again? Well, we don't know what's in our directories, right? So we're sitting in this slash folder, and how do we look around? So there's a command called ls that lists everything that's in the folder. So if we say ls, we kind of see this color coordinated here. And the color coordination, it just depends on if it's a folder, if the folder's read-write, there's permission settings, which we're going to get into later. But the majority of these here are folders. Okay, well, we know we just came out of root, so we can go back into root. Now, how do we do that? So we can say change directory root, and we can actually hit tab to autocomplete. I don't know if you caught that, but there's no R any folder besides root. So at R, I can just hit tab, and it should type it out for me. Oh, I lied. There is a run in here somewhere, but it's hidden. We're going to cover that soon as well. So RO, hit tab, autocomplete, can change directory into root. So let's ls in root and see what's in here. Okay, this is more like our home folder, right? So we've got desktop, documents, downloads. This is kind of what applies to the root user. So what if we're sitting in this root folder here and we wanted to access instead this Etsy folder? Well, could we do the same Etsy command here? Well, I'm hitting tab and nothing's happening. Well, because Etsy doesn't belong in this area, right? But if we put a / in front of it, because this is the base, and then we hit Etsy there, now we can navigate to the Etsy folder. And we can actually double tab and see what's all in the Etsy folder, like an ls, say no. Another way to do that is if we wanted to ls what's in the Etsy folder without navigating to it, we could just type ls Etsy, and you can see everything that's in here.